Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about pairwise comparisons. We're going to talk about what they are and how we find all possible comparisons between each of the candidates. So starting with our first example, we have number of voters, we have our preference schedule, first, second, third, and fourth choice. Because we have four choices, we automatically know that we have four candidates. We have A, B, C, and D. So the method of pairwise comparisons, we have to compare each candidate against every other candidate. So for example, if we have A has to be compared against every other candidate. So it can't be compared against itself, but we're going to do A versus B. Then we have A versus C. Then we're going to have A versus D. So now we've compared A against all three other candidates. The next thing we're going to move to is we're going to do B versus, well, B could be compared against these other three, the A, D, or C. So we could do B versus A. But if we look at B versus A, we've already done A versus B, so we don't need B versus A. So now we're going to do B versus, well, we can't do B versus itself because that's not a comparison, so we're going to do B versus C. B versus C, good, we haven't done that one yet. Now we're going to do B versus D. All right, now we're going to move on to our C's. C versus, well, technically we need to compare C against all the other ones. We have A, D, and B, so let's do C versus A. We've already done A versus C, so we don't need C versus A anymore. So now we're going to do C versus B. Again, we've already done B versus C, so we don't need that one. Then we need C versus D. We haven't done that one yet, so we're going to keep that one there. The next thing we're going to move to is D. So we have D needs to go against A, B, and C. D versus A, we had that one up here. We're going to cross that one out. We have D versus B. We did B versus D, which is the same thing. And then we had D versus C. D versus C was also done, so we're going to cross that out. If you notice, we have a total of 6 comparisons. So our 6 comparisons, we can double check that we have all of them by using our formula for pairwise comparisons. So how many candidates do we have here? We had 1, 2, 3, 4 choices. So our N equals 4. So what we're going to do now is use the formula for pairwise comparisons. So we have N times N minus 1 divided by 2. So in this case, we have 4 times 4 minus 1 divided by 2, which gives us 4 times 3 divided by 2, which is 6. If you notice with A, we had 3 A's. We did A versus all of the rest of them. Then we moved on to B. Did we need to do B versus A? We didn't need to do that one because we'd already done it before. And then C versus D, we just do the comparison of that candidate compared to all of the following after. So if, for example, we have 5 candidates, instead of having to sit there and compare out all of them and cross them out when they duplicate, we can just do A versus B, C, D, and E. Then B versus C, D, E, and then C versus D and E, and then D versus E, and then we're done. Now we're going to move on and actually solve this using pairwise comparisons. So we have all of our comparisons. We have A versus B, A versus C, A versus D, BC, BD, and CD. So we're going to figure out which ones of these actually end up winning. So if we look at our preference table, we have in the first column of our preference schedule, we have 5 people who voted A, D, C, and B. So these 5 people voted A greater than B. So in this case, we're going to have A versus B. And A is going to have 5 because A is greater than B. B is their 4th place choice. Now we're going to move on to this column. So we have B is greater than A. So B gets these 6 points. Now we're going to move to the 3rd column. We have B higher than A. So these 3 go to B. We have A greater than B. So these 2 go to A. And then we have 4 here where A is greater than B. It's higher up on their preference schedule. And we're going to give those 4 to A. When we tally these up, we get 9 on this column and 11 on this column. So 11 is greater than 9, so in this pairwise comparison, A is our winner. So now we can move on, and we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it for B versus C, or A versus C. We can do this for any of them. We're going to go through, and let's say we do A versus C. So in A versus C, in this first column, A is bigger than C, so A gets these 5. In the second column, we have C is greater than A. It's higher up on their list. So we're going to put 6 over here with C. Then we have A is greater than C. So we're going to put these 3 for A. C is greater than A. So we're going to put these 2. And then these 4, C is also greater than A. So we're going to put 4 here. So in this column, we have 12. And in this column, we have 8. So the winner of this one is going to be C. So we can go ahead and circle C. Now we're going to move on to A versus D. So if we have A versus D, we're going to go through and we're going to compare each of them. So if we have the first column with 5 voters, we're going to have A is greater than D, so these 5 go to A. These 6 would go to D is greater than A, so the 6 is going to go over here. These 3, we have D and then A, so it's going to go to D also. Then the 2, we have D is less than A, so A gets these 2. And the fourth one, we have D is greater than A, so these 4 are going to go to D. When we tally these up, we get 7 and 13. So our winner for this one is going to be D. Now we have 3 more comparisons left, and we're going to go through each of them. We can do a little bit of a shortcut here. If you have your calculator out, instead of actually having to tally these out, we can just look at across the board. So if we have B versus C, we can look at B. Okay, well, is B greater than C here? No. What about here? All right, so let's just go ahead and write down all of the B's. We see B is greater than C, B is greater than C, B is less than C, and then B is less than C. So we've already tallied up all of our B's. So we have 9 points here for B. Well, if 9 of them are winning here, how many do you think C is going to win? How many comparisons are each of these tallying up to be? If you notice, this tallies to be 20. This tallies to be 20. And this tallies to be 20. So we have a little bit of a shortcut. Instead of having to add up all of B and all of C, we can just add up one of the columns or one of the letters, and if it's less than half of this, we know that we lose. That means that the other half right here, C has to have 11 in order for this to tally to be 20. So our little bit of shortcut is going to say, okay, we don't even really need to know how many C wins. We can just circle C because it's going to be obviously greater than the 9. We can do the same thing when we have B versus D. So if we have D is greater, B is greater, B is greater, D, and D. So for our D is greater, we have 5 right here where D is greater here, and D is greater here when we do our B versus D. That should be a B. I think it got erased. So we have 5 plus 4 plus 4, or 5 plus 2 plus 4. So when we do our B versus D, D is winning 5 plus 2 plus 4. So we obviously already have over what we needed before, so D is our winner without even having to add up B. We can do the same thing on C versus D. So if we look at our C versus D over here, we have C is higher in which columns? So we're going to look C and D. C and D is greater here, so these 6 go to C. C is less, C is greater here, and then which one is greater here? Okay, well, now D is still greater, so we have 6 plus 2, which is only going to be 8. So if this one is 8, D is obviously greater than our total, so D is going to win. Now that we have all of our winnings between each pairwise comparison, in this example we have only 6 pairwise comparisons. If we had 5 candidates instead of 4 candidates, we're going to have 24 comparisons. So it's going to be a little bit more than what we're doing now, but we would do that for each one and tally them up. Now we're going to look at each candidate's total winnings and loss. So we have A, B, C, and D. So between A, B, C, and D, how many times did A win? How many times did we circle A out of these 6? Well, A won 1 time. How many times did we circle B? B didn't win any, so we're going to put 0 there. C, we circled twice, here and here. And D, we circled 1, 2, 3 times. Now we can tally these up to make sure they total to 6, to make sure we did all of our pairwise comparisons. So now if we have our pairwise comparisons, we've given our points based on how many had those points. So who is our first place candidate using the method of pairwise comparisons? Because D won the most pairwise comparisons, D is our first place candidate.